They said I was useless. My own sister stood in her mother's mansion, smiled, and told everyone I was just the leftover child. Then she took everything, my room, my mother's heirlooms, even my name from the will. I thought silence would keep the peace until the butler walked in and handed me the master key. And that's when everything changed. I woke before the sun, as I usually did in that house. The marble floors kept the cold like they held secrets, and my footsteps barely made a sound. That morning, laughter, not mine, cut through the stillness. High-pitched. Unfamiliar. It echoed through the hallway like it belonged there now. I followed it downstairs, already knowing what I didn't want to see. Odalise sat at Mother's breakfast table. Legs crossed, sipping coffee from the rose-painted china cup only Mom used. The same one she'd told us never to touch. It used to mean something. Mr. Rowan stood behind her like a misplaced statue, holding the silver tray with just enough tremble to betray his nerves. His eyes met mine for a moment, then fell to the floor. "Well," Odalise said, not even turning fully to me, "you still wear those sweaters? Some habits just don't die, do they?" I looked down at the same wool cardigan I'd worn for years. A gift from Mother. Not expensive, not flashy, just warm, familiar. I said nothing. Words with Odalise were usually a waste of oxygen. She never understood that refinement had nothing to do with cashmere or imported coffee. Our parents built their name on discretion, compassion, and work that never made headlines. Odalise only ever saw the photo ops. While she bought handbags and hashtags, I spent the last decade managing Mother's projects overseas, building schools, training nurses, funneling help into places no one posted about. All done quietly. All done right. "Still like your mornings early, huh?" Odalise said, stirring her coffee too loudly. "Some things never change." I kept walking. She waited until Mr. Rowan poured another cup before dropping the real blow. "You probably should know," she said, almost casually, "the house is mine now." I stopped. Not abruptly, just enough to hear her out. "What are you talking about?" I asked. She pulled a manila folder from under the table and slid it toward me. "Everything was finalized last week. It's already done." "That's not possible. The will hasn't even." "It's here," she cut me off, tapping the folder. "Signed. Filed. Legal." I didn't have to open it. I saw the signature, my mother's name, written in a hand that had been still for 6 months. Forged. Poorly. Mr. Rowan turned his head, pretending the sugar bowl needed rearranging. My stomach tightened. Odalise leaned in just enough to whisper, "Don't look so surprised. You never cared about this house anyway. You just liked pretending you mattered." There it was. She could have slapped me and it would have felt kinder. I didn't flinch. Didn't give her the gift of seeing me break. I just looked at her, the smug tilt of her head, the same look she wore at 16 when she took credit for the science fair project I built. Some faces don't change. People like her call others useless not because they believe it, but because they fear the quiet proof that it isn't true. I nodded once. "I see." She blinked, maybe expecting more. But I learned long ago, some things were better said with silence. In my pocket, my fingers brushed the smooth curve of a rosewood hairpin. My mother's. The one she gave me in the hospital, weeks before she passed. "Everything worth keeping needs quiet hands," she'd whispered as she showed me how to polish the old sideboard in her room. The smell of lemon oil and patience filled the memory. My father had a saying too, "Silence isn't weakness, it's precision waiting for its moment." That thought held me like armor now. Odalise stood, pushing her chair back with unnecessary flair. "You're free to leave anytime. I can arrange a driver if you want to save face." "This is still my home," I replied. Soft. Firm. For a flicker of a second, Mr. Rowan's eyes met mine again. There was something there, not loyalty, maybe not even pity, but awareness. Recognition that someone else still remembered how this place was meant to be. The rest of the day passed like fog. Rooms that once held laughter now hummed with calculation. I walked the halls slowly, letting memories sting where they used to soothe. Back in Mother's study, the dust danced in shafts of light. Everything was untouched. On the desk, under the lamp, sat the wooden box she told me never to open until the right time. I reached into the drawer, pulled out the key she left for me, and set it beside the box. I didn't open it. Not yet. The silence wrapped around me like a decision. I turned off the lamp, ready to leave for the night when I heard her voice echo faintly from the hallway. "She'll be gone before the week ends." I stood still in the dark, letting her words settle. Then I smiled, just barely, and whispered into the quiet, "Maybe. But not the way you think." The next morning didn't greet me with light. It greeted me with hammering. The kind that rattles your teeth and doesn't belong in a house like this. I pulled the curtains back and saw men in overalls dragging out what was left of the library's oak paneling. One of them laughed while tossing aside a carved chair leg like it was trash. I didn't bother dressing up, just slipped on whatever was near the bed and headed downstairs. Adelise wasn't anywhere in sight, but her mark was all over the place. Plastic sheeting covered the floors. The chandelier in the dining room hung by wires, half removed. Someone had taped up a design board with swatches labeled "Modern Elegance." It looked like a hotel lobby lost its mind. I found Mr. Rowan by the side hall, standing with a clipboard in hand. He stiffened the moment he saw me. "You knew about this?" I asked. He didn't meet my eyes. "Miss Adelise requested renovations begin promptly. You didn't think to mention it yesterday?" "My role is to serve, not to interfere." His voice was colder than I remembered. Not rude, just blank. I walked past him toward the study. Or what used to be the study. Men with gloves were boxing up the books. The desk was already gone. The shelves stood stripped and exposed like skeletons. Every nail pulled felt like erasing her. I stood there for a long while, arms crossed, saying nothing. Just watching. By the time the room emptied, I sat on the floor and opened my notebook. One sentence. "When silence replaces loyalty, it's never by accident." The day passed in a haze. I moved from room to room like a ghost, half expecting to hear my parents arguing over which lamp went where. Instead, I heard hammers and tape measures and fake politeness. Then I heard something else. Voices, low, urgent. I pressed my ear to the double doors of the parlor. "She'll sign the transfer papers eventually," Adelise was saying. "She always folds." "I'm not sure it's wise to push her this soon," Rowan replied. "We don't need her trust, just her signature." The air inside me changed. I stepped back and walked away before they noticed. Back to the kitchen, then out to the garden for air. I needed to think. At lunch, she sat across from me like it was a casual Thursday. "I've been thinking," she said between bites of salad, "that greenhouse Mother was so obsessed with? It's an eyesore. I have plans." I didn't flinch. "That's fine. Just don't touch the rosewood corner." Her fork paused midair. "What's so special about that?" I shrugged. "Maybe nothing." I could see her trying to read me, but she never learned how. I was always the quiet one. The one people assumed would break if you just waited long enough. After lunch, I found Mr. Rowan alone in the library, standing in front of the fireplace. In his hand was a black and white photograph of my mother. He didn't move when I entered. "You used to iron her handkerchiefs," I said. He turned slowly. "I did." "You're helping Adelise now?" He looked older than yesterday. "Some debts," he said, voice rough, "outlive their masters." I frowned. "What does that mean?" He slipped something into his jacket pocket too fast. "What was that?" "Nothing of concern." But I saw it. Just a glimpse, cream envelope, her handwriting. "I don't believe you." He looked away. "Then perhaps we're both tired of pretending." I left before I said something I'd regret. Or maybe something I wouldn't. The afternoon was quiet. Too quiet. I went searching, not for comfort, but for facts. Old records, old drawers. Inside the library cabinet, I found property files. Most looked right. Some didn't. My name was missing on things I'd signed years ago. The ink was newer. The formatting clumsy. It was like someone had copied, then rushed the cleanup. I started a new page in my notebook. Headings. Dates. Discrepancies. If they wanted a war, I'd give them one, my way. Not shouting. Not crying. Proof. That's what mattered. "You don't win a war by shouting," I wrote. "You win by collecting proof while they laugh." Evening came with no apology. The house was quieter now, workers gone. I locked my door. Sat on the edge of the bed, reviewing everything I'd written. Then I saw it. An envelope, pushed under the door. No stamp. No name. I opened it with care, like it might bite. One line, handwritten in a familiar slant: "The key is not in the box. Trust the one who hesitates." I looked up. Through the cracked door, I caught the edge of movement. Mr. Rowan's silhouette stood at the top of the stairs. Still. Watching. Then gone. So he hasn't chosen a side yet, I whispered to the dark. I slipped on my slippers and stepped into the hall. Faint footsteps echoed below. A warm light glowed under the study door, and I followed. The greenhouse lay in ruin. Broken glass, shattered pots, dead branches strewn across stone paths. The sky hung low with gray clouds as though mourning what had been lost. I stepped through the threshold where Mother once nurtured orchids. Now, only debris and silence remained. A cracked gardening glove lay among the wreckage, embroidered with her initials. I picked it up, fingers brushing the faded thread. Memories spooled through me, Mother's gentle hands pruning roses at dusk, her soft lullabies echoing through the garden. I remember standing behind her, wanting her to turn and see me. Almost always, she didn't. I whisper to the air, when people are quiet long enough, they become soil, nothing left but what others grow over them. It was a line I'd written in my journal long ago, but hearing it now stung. I felt myself bending inward, a part of me wanting to collapse, another part rising with clarity. This place, this garden, held ghosts, stories, and secrets I needed to reclaim. Then I saw Odalise across the lawn, leaning over workers. She pointed at the old family tree near the property's boundary. "Remove it," she ordered. My heart squeezed. The tree wasn't just old wood, it was home. It had stood while storms passed, roots deep in our history. I stepped forward. "Is anything sacred to you? Or is it all performance now?" My voice cut above the chatter of hammers and water cans. The workers halted as Odalise turned, surprised to see me there. She straightened, lips curled. "You are always the shadow in this house. I'm just cleaning the corners." She gestured to the greenhouse ruins as though sweeping away dust. Humiliation burned me. I swallowed hard, chest tight. Mr. Rowan emerged down the path, hands folded. He watched, frozen. No intervention. Odalise's eyes flicked to him, smugly. She met my gaze and dared, "Leave. If you can't accept change, get out." My knees felt unsteady, but I held my ground. "You don't erase things just because you can," I said. She raised an eyebrow. "Power is what you do with what remains." The workers turned back to their work. The moment snapped. She didn't wait for a reply. She walked off, heels clicking. I retreated toward the old workshop behind the estate. Dust motes floated in the half-light. My father's tools still hung, forgotten. I sank to my knees, silent tears easing out. Not because I was weak, but because I had held in grief too long. I let them fall. I replayed a memory, father giving Odalise the new camera while handing me the faulty one. I was then, and often still felt, second choice. My journal lay open inside my bag. I wrote, "They raised me to feel small and called it humility. Now they call my silence weakness." The words tasted bitter on my tongue. I opened a drawer in that broken workshop and found a stack of aged papers, estate maps, boundary notes, margin scribbles in his handwriting. One map showed a plot he never transferred, forgotten land. That might save something. Night came and I made my way to the library, the heavy leather door protesting behind me. I found Mr. Rowan at the far end, standing near a lamp's glow. He didn't startle at my arrival. "You thought I'd stay quiet like always?" I asked. He looked at me, quiet but present. "You were never quiet," he said. "Just unheard." I allowed myself a small nod. I felt him watching now, not as guard, but as witness. And I sensed his loyalty had crossroads ahead. I walked out into the garden where the tree had stood. Workers had started chipping at the bark. I dug at the base with bare hands, sharp stones under nails. A box, weathered and gray, tumbled from the earth. Inside, a torn family photograph. My part was missing, cut out cleanly. My face was erased. Headlights flicked on down the drive. Someone watched. I faced the dark. I whispered, "Let them try." A voice behind me said soft and cold, "You shouldn't be here this late." The hallway was still humming with the echo of that voice, "You shouldn't be here this late." When I slipped quietly past the study doors and made my way toward the old archives. The house seemed to breathe in the dark, its walls tighter, less forgiving. I didn't bother with shoes. My steps were soft. My heart, less so. The archive room was never locked at night. My father believed in transparency within the family. He'd say it while sealing boxes and hiding them behind paintings. Typical. I flipped the wall light. Dust danced in the yellow beam. The place smelled like old paper and wood oil. There, tucked behind a row of leather-bound volumes, was a shelf I hadn't noticed before. Its edge bowed slightly, like someone had leaned on it too long. I reached behind a loose frame and felt cold metal. A safe. Its style was scratched, numbers faded from decades of use. I stood there, forehead against the wall, whispering dates I remembered: Mom's birthday, their anniversary, the day my father got the house back from the bank. Nothing. Then I said her mother's maiden name under my breath, turned the dial once more, and it clicked. The door creaked open. Inside was a single leather-bound book, no dust, no mold. Just clean, dry paper. The cover read, Last Will and Trust. My hands trembled, but I flipped it open. There it was. My name. In ink. In full. Olivia Ann Whitbridge, designated heir to 3 parcels of land, including the lower orchard and the rosewood garden. I exhaled too loudly. Then, her voice. You'll regret this, Odalise. Right outside the door. Not yelling. Not stomping. Just hovering. I closed the book with both hands, heart racing. She didn't come in. Didn't knock. Just waited for a beat. Then footsteps walking away. I sat on the floor and opened the book again. There were footnotes, scribbled in the margins. My mother's handwriting. I knew it from her recipe cards. Trust your science, not their mouths. That's what it said under a paragraph about asset disputes. I read it twice. It didn't make perfect sense, but it was her. And she was telling me something. I pulled my phone from my coat and began photographing every page. Snap. Snap. I whispered, this is the truth they buried. Then doubt creeped in. What if it was all staged? What if someone forged this too? What if the paper was planted to throw me off? The safe wasn't locked tight. The handwriting could have been faked. Mr. Rowan. The letter in his coat. That sealed envelope. I left the archive and walked the hallway. The lights flickered once behind me, old wiring, maybe, or maybe not. Mr. Rowan was coming down the stairs. His coat perfect. His expression unreadable. You know what she did, I said. You watched. He didn't deny it. I serve loyalty, not lies, he replied. But some truths are dangerous to carry alone. He reached into his coat. Passed me a folded envelope. Then nodded once, and walked off. I stood still. The envelope was yellowed, the seal brittle. I opened it carefully. Inside was a transcript, typed, time-stamped. A conversation between 2 legal representatives and Odalise. Terms like silent transfer and primary heir swap jumped off the page. This wasn't hearsay. This was concrete. A record. I closed the letter. My hands steadied. Back in the archives, I slid the will back into its hiding place and shut the safe. I looked into the dark room and spoke low, but firm. They buried me, but I'm digging my way out. Then the lights buzzed again, and went out. My eyes adjusted slowly. At the end of the hallway, I saw movement. A shape. Then a whisper, you should leave this alone. I clutched the envelope and stepped forward. I didn't run. I didn't ask who it was. I just walked into the dark, toward the faint glow bleeding in through the greenhouse glass. I walked down the hallway and past portraits that felt foreign, my face missing from more than one. This wing had always housed my childhood, my small victories and quiet moments. I approached my old bedroom door at the end. It was locked. I remembered Dad insisting, no one touches that room while I draw a breath. I knocked softly. From inside came Odalise's voice. I gave orders to reconfigure that wing. The sting was sharp. That room held my first drawings, the sketches I poured heart into, the journal I hid under pillows. I pressed my palm to the wood and whispered, you once held my dreams. Now you hold betrayal. Moments later, the lock clicked. The door swung open. Inside, crates labeled Odalise collection lined the walls. My things were gone. A fake painting covered the wall where my sketch pad once hung. I grabbed the crate, tearing it open. I found broken photo frames, fragments of torn pages from my journal, blank canvases she never bothered to label. It was as if she was cataloging my existence and deciding I was nothing. Rage climbed up my throat. I didn't shout. I let the quiet roar of betrayal fill me. I stepped outside into the garden ruins, where twilight filtered through broken glass and skeletal vines. Samuel, the old gardener, knelt among the ruins. I had not seen him in days. He looked up, worn but steadfast. He reached into his smock and pressed a small metal key into my palm. "I kept it safe," he said, voice low. I asked him why, now, after all this. He looked at me, eyes cloudy with years. "Some debts cannot be repaid, only balanced." The key felt cold in my fingers, but it was alive. I nodded once. We stayed silent under the fading light. Back in a spare room, I laid out fragments of memory and reality. I set my journal alongside torn pages, sketches beside photographs. I matched what remained to what was lost. I made lists, items missing, items hidden. I sent a quiet message to Rowan, asking for late access to the restricted wings. In my pocket, I had the gardener's key. I tucked it into a folder labeled evidence. I whispered to myself, "They strip the walls, but they can't strip a memory when it's rooted in you." Night came heavy and slow. I crept back toward my childhood bedroom. The door stood slightly ajar when I reached it. I gripped the key in my hand, heart thumping. I hesitated a moment, and the door pushed inward without my turn. My breath caught. Inside was darkness. A soft voice floated, "I was wondering when you'd try to reclaim it." By midday, the great hall was already filled, camera crews, community leaders, and a few faces I hadn't seen in decades. I was on the guest list, of course. Couldn't risk the optics of excluding me outright. The room had the scent of polished wood, artificial roses, and ambition. Adelise stood near the podium like a politician selling legacy in bulk. I stepped in just as the lights shifted and the microphone popped to life. Cameras clicked the moment I crossed the threshold. I didn't smile. Just nodded slightly and took my place along the edge of the crowd, notebook tucked tight against my side. Adelise opened the event with warm words and a tight jaw. "As Solarian steward of the Darnell estate," she said, gesturing with confidence that never quite reached her eyes, "it's my honor to launch a new initiative, Rebuilding with Purpose." She never mentioned me. Not once. As if I'd been written out of the family ledger and refiled under irrelevant. She turned and motioned me aside like a coat on the wrong hook. The MC, reading from his card with awkward cheer, stumbled a little. "Let's welcome Mrs. Velma Darnell, heir of House Darnell," he paused, "and Olivia, our gracious supporter." My stomach dropped. Supporter? My throat tightened. People murmured. My jaw set. I stayed still, watching, cataloging every face that didn't flinch and every lens that turned my way. They weren't just rewriting the story. They were erasing it in real time. Then came the auction. For charity, of course. Always charity. Adelise called it a gesture of goodwill. She unveiled items from the Darnell collection, family heirlooms suddenly tagged and priced. The last item pulled a sharp breath from my lungs, the rosewood hairpin. My mother's. Mine. I'd worn it that night years ago, the one night she'd called me beautiful. Adelise held it like it was a relic, not theft. "A token of the family's history," she said. "Available to the highest bidder." I stepped forward. Not loudly. Just enough. "That was mine. You stole my history." I didn't raise my voice, but it sliced the air. Gasps fluttered. The cameras swung. A woman near the back clutched her pearls. I didn't flinch. Adelise chuckled lightly, voice dripping sugar. "Charity is bigger than one trinket, Olivia." Her smile barely held. I held her gaze. "It was never about charity. It was your statement." And just like that, the room stilled. No music. No forced laughter. Just silence. I heard someone whisper, "She doesn't back down." I caught Rowan watching me, no nod, no words. But he didn't look away. I stepped back into the shadows, hand closed around the photo I'd snapped of the auction listing. They could fake words. But not paper. Not time-stamped proof. The event wound down. People clinked glasses. I didn't stay for wine. I slipped through side corridors, past oil portraits with eyes that had never looked kindly on me. By the garden windows, I paused. Outside, Adelise stood by a black SUV, gesturing sharply to someone inside. Hidden plans. Quiet power moves. I stood still, then whispered, "They're already preparing their next move." My hand tightened around the folded photo. I wouldn't let this drop. The corridors were hushed, lamplit and cold, as I slipped through after midnight. My shoes whispered on the rug runner, and shadows stretched long across walls once familiar. I paused at a narrowing turn where two voices met in darkness. There was Adelise's clipped tone, Rowan's slower reply. I pressed myself flat against the wall, listening. He sounded hesitant. She sounded firm. Something about their exchange made my blood freeze. I couldn't hear every word. But I heard enough. Rowan's voice cracked. He sounded torn. I backed away, heart pounding, instincts screaming stay quiet. But I didn't stay hidden long. I followed their path, rounding a corner into the library. Rowan was there, alone now, shoulders slumped. I stepped forward, voice tight. "Why are you helping her?" He started. He swallowed. His hands shook. "I delivered forged papers. I changed locks," he whispered. My breath caught. He produced an envelope. "Here. The original deeds. Custody papers. Titles." His eyes flickered, raw. I never believed she was the only child meant to inherit. Betrayal wrapped in salvation. I took the envelope with careful fingers. I didn't triumph. I just waited. The room seemed too small now. My pulse roared. I nodded once. He looked away. I didn't confront Adelise. I did something sharper. I retreated to Mother's study, placed deeds and will pages into a leather briefcase. I left a note, simple: "I will reveal everything tomorrow." No threats. No drama. Just quiet resolve. I walked out to the mansion balcony and stared down at the grounds. The night wind blew across my skin. I didn't need validation. I felt it. Before dawn, I moved. I sent copies of those deeds and the will to neighbors, to a trusted local reporter, to someone I knew in the attorney's office. I left the hairpin listing photo at Adelise's desk. No signatures, just evidence. I arranged for a journalist to arrive in the morning. In my mind, I thought, silence is not surrender, it's the pause before victory. I stood on the balcony as headlights flickered at the drive. A car glowed with press decals. The reporter's silhouette shifted under trees. I whispered into the dawn, almost to the wind, "Let the world see what she stole." I slipped inside and slid the door shut behind me, heart steady, ready for what came next. I entered the archive in darkness, briefcase in hand. Lamps flickered as I passed rows of document cases, the hush heavy. Portraits lined the corridor, ancestors long dead. One frame stood empty. Mine should have been there, but it was gone. I swallowed hard. My footsteps echoed. This is the hour, I told myself. Quiet doesn't last when lies live too long. At the vault, I found the workstation. My fingers trembled as I inserted the USB Rowan gave me. The screen lit. A video began to play. My mother's voice filled the chamber like a ghost come home. She spoke of suspicion, ambition, and names she trusted. She named me as rightful heir to land parcels she never publicly titled. If I am gone, she said, she must be safe. She must inherit the legacy I built quietly. On her desk lay the rosewood hairpin, my hairpin, next to her hands folded in determination. My chest tightened. I leaned closer. That voice. That look. Validation and shock coiled in my throat. Rewinding further, I saw a family gathering photo. All smiles, all faces. Except me. My place in history had been erased. The image had been cropped, a move invisible to many, obvious to me. I froze. This was more than theft. It was erasure. I screenshot it. I held the freeze frame of an absent name. I whispered, "You recast history, and forgot history always blushes in the mirror." Rage thickened, sorrow sharpened. I stepped into the portrait hall, USB in hand. Adelise stood stiffly among ancestral faces. I didn't wait for her to speak. "You cropped me out of the picture. You muted my name in the will. Tonight, you erased your own soul." My voice echoed. She recoiled. I hit play on the video. She tried to deny it, but the footage played anyway. Witnesses gasped. Security doors slammed shut around us. She turned pale. Rowan emerged from behind, sliding the doors closed. I felt vindication, a weight lifted. Her control began to crack. Adelise whispered something I couldn't hear. Lights flickered. The backup generator buzzed, and failed. Darkness swallowed the hall. In that blackout, the only glow was from the video screen held before me. Faces turned to light. Eyes searching. I raised my voice, quiet but clear, "Maybe now you'll see me," no shadow left to hide behind. Across the dark hall, I saw her tremble. The silence broke. Sirens echoed. The war had shifted. I woke up with the first light bleeding through the tall windows of the study. The room felt still, not dead, not tense, just still. No more shouting. No more guards. No secrets left gasping under velvet drapes. I sat up on the couch, bones sore from the night before. Somewhere in the hall, a clock ticked like it always had, only now I heard it. A soft knock. Rowan stepped in with 2 mugs of coffee, handed me one without a word. His nod was enough. He didn't linger. Just turned and walked out like someone who had finally set down a burden too heavy to speak of. I moved toward the window. The garden stretched wide and golden under the new morning sun. My voice, if it had been recorded, would have cracked. Sometimes endings come not with thunder, but with the quiet weight of truth finally set down. And this was that quiet. By mid-morning, the legal team had arrived. No press this time. Just those who mattered, and those who couldn't avoid it. The air inside the grand hall had changed. Tension had evaporated, replaced with something that smelled like ash and old paper. Rowan stood by the fireplace and began the reading. The updated will was clear. My mother had not been swayed in her final days. Her recorded testimony, the documents, even her handwriting, everything aligned. I wasn't just part of the legacy. I was the legacy. Odalise was omitted entirely. The charitable trust remained, as my mother intended. Nothing was twisted anymore. Rowan paused, then opened one last envelope. "She asked this be read aloud," he said. His voice held steady, but something in his jaw trembled. He read, "Forgiveness is not weakness, live. It is the unchaining of your own soul. I could not teach them to love you. But I hoped you'd teach yourself to walk free of their shadows." I said nothing. Just held the letter like a rope pulling me out of deep water. Then came the part I hadn't expected. Odalise stood. No announcement, no demand. She looked smaller. Not in body, something deeper than that. She asked to speak. Her voice shook like dry leaves. She didn't beg, didn't explain away her actions. "You were never weak," she said, eyes cast down. "I was just too afraid to be seen through." And just like that, she turned and walked out. No suitcase. No final word. Just a coat over her shoulders and footsteps that faded down the hall. I didn't chase. I didn't need to. Later, I walked the house. Not like an owner, but like someone finally allowed to take up space. I ran my hand over frames that once felt too cold to touch. I lingered by the photo gallery and found the original family photo, before it was ever cropped, before anyone decided I didn't belong. I hung it next to the tempered one. Let them speak to each other. In the kitchen, I invited the staff, who had watched everything unfold like silent sentries, to sit and eat. We broke bread not out of duty, but something closer to recognition. They smiled, soft and real. We laughed once or twice. It felt new. Eventually, I stepped outside. The air had a crisp edge to it, but not biting. Rowan followed quietly. At the garden's edge, he handed me the master key. This time, it didn't feel like a tool for protection. It felt like a symbol of closure. "You don't have to lock things down anymore," he said. "You've already opened what mattered." I walked past the gate, turned once to look back, not out of longing, just acknowledgement. The house stood there. Still proud. Still massive. But now, it knew my name. And under my breath, not to him, not to the wind, just to myself, I said, "I'm not who they said I was. I'm who I chose to become."